With me now is David Becker. He's Executive Director of the Nonpartisan Center for Election Innovation and Research. Mr. Becker, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm not going to repeat the president's claims because that gives more oxygen to something that's false, but just for the sake of our viewers who may not be following this closely, why should they be confident that voting by mail is secure?
Well, the main reason they should be confident is because we've been doing it for a very long time and states know what they're doing. Whether it's in states like Washington and Oregon and Colorado that have been doing this for decades, every single state allows for some form of mail balloting. About 25% of all ballots that were cast in the 2016 election, in which President Trump won, of course, were cast by mail. Our military relies upon the mail for voting. We've been doing it since at least the Civil War. There are a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure that every ballot that's sent out, we know where it's going, that the ballots that come back are validated so the right people are voting.
Is there a difference in security and the risk of fraud between requesting and receiving an absentee ballot and states mailing ballots to all eligible voters?
What the states have done have found is there's not much difference in security at all because of the validation process that goes on once the ballots are received. The ballots are each checked with personal information the voters have to put on the envelope. Their signatures are matched against the signature they have on file. And then, of course, we double check to make sure that that person hasn't tried to vote elsewhere or another time. So there are a variety of security measures in place. Of the 8 states where they're going to mail ballots this fall to all voters, 4 of them run by Republican election officials. So this is a very bipartisan thing.
You know, I'm old enough to remember the 2000 election when you had the fights over hanging chads and disputes over which ballots that were accepted and not. Do we foresee an election night or nights where you have Republican and Democratic operatives over the shoulder of election officials saying, no, that signature doesn't match?
Well, it could be. I mean, we're going to try to avoid that best we can, but depending on how close the margins are and how many voters vote by mail for the first time, there could be issues with that. One of the things about mail voting is there are ways that voters who are unfamiliar with the process can make mistakes. And so mail voting is a really good option for all voters, especially for those voters who are frequent voters, who have voted before, who have voted by mail before. It's very likely they're going to be able to vote successfully. But if there's any concern about that, if any voters aren't entirely comfortable voting by mail, there will be safe options to vote in person, particularly early in advance of the November election day. And I highly encourage people to do that if they have any doubts about mail voting whatsoever.
Now, we do expect more people to vote by mail because they're concerned, understandably, about going to a polling station in the middle of a pandemic. So as this is happening, the president and an ally who is now the Postmaster General is taking resources away from the Postal Service. You might imagine if you want more people to vote, you would give more resources. But the president said yesterday, definitively, he doesn't want to give the money because if you give the money, then they can't process the votes. What can Congress do to prevent that from happening, to support the Postal Service?
Well, Congress needs to provide funding to the Postal Service and to election officials to help them process all of the ballots to run the election appropriately this fall. And of course, the Postal Service isn't just important for ballots. There's a lot of election information that goes out by mail. There's going to be a lot of polling place changes, voting hours and options that have changed. People have last voted. It's the way election officials communicate that to voters is by the mail. And of course, our entire economy is based on the Postal Service. There's a lot of reasons to support.
Prescription drugs, right? A lot of people get that via the mail. Final question. There are a lot of different rules, processes in different states. For people watching right now who don't know the answer to the question, how can I get a mail-in ballot and how can I make sure that that ballot is counted? What's the best resource? Where can people go right now to look? And I want folks to have a pen and paper out to write this down. What's the best resource for people to find the answer to that question?
The place I always go is a website run by the National Association of Secretaries of State, canivote.org, canivote.org. And it has a drop-down menu where you can pick your state, and it'll direct you to the official website, election website of each state. You can find all the information you need, and whatever you do, plan early. Request a ballot early, return a ballot early, vote in person early. Whatever you do, plan early this fall.
That site again is, repeat it?
canivote.org.
Okay, folks, I'm going to tweet that out now at Jim Sciutto so you have it. You can access it quickly. This is an issue we're going to continue to cover on this broadcast and get all of you the information you need so that you can vote. David Becker, thanks very much for your time.